Hi, everyone. Thank you again. It's great to be here. Great to be on this third Unity 4J or third Vigil, uniting in solidarity with Julian Assange. And I'm so excited to be here with fellow independent journalist and contributor to Just Inform as well, Tim Black. He has done amazing work, and he was also with us on the very first Solidarity Vigil, the Reconnect Julian Vigil, on the first day that Julian Assange was cut off from the world. Welcome, Tim. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just want to say I appreciate you and Susie Dawson for all your work for putting this together, and all the others who work with you to do this so consistently. It's a very important cause, and I just appreciate the hell out of you for doing it.
Well, we appreciate you and everyone who comes to join us for this, because I know we all have busy schedules, but we are really trying to keep Julian Assange in the news and in the news cycle, because we understand that as he is unable to speak to us, this can tend to fall to the bottom and slip between the cracks of the news cycle. So, I know that we kind of discussed this in our first discussion with you in the Reconnect Julian Assange Vigil. But can you explain to maybe the viewers and the listeners who weren't with us during that first vigil, and tell them why it is that you support Julian Assange and kind of what drew you to support WikiLeaks work in general?
Okay, well, because I like the truth. I like knowing what's going on in the world. I like to know what they don't want me to know. Right. So that's what drove me to WikiLeaks. That's what attracted me then. That's what attracts me now. WikiLeaks publishes information that is important. As you stated, one of the reasons why this marathon is so important is that there's so many distractions in our news cycle every day. Right. I'll tell you, just to kind of put it in perspective, I was watching all the coverage of this Congolese woman who climbed the Statue of Liberty. Now, she just did this on 4th of July. She climbed the Statue of Liberty. She sat on the toe of the statue, and she was up there for 4 hours. It was a standoff. She told cops, "You come up here, I'm gonna push you off. I'm up here because I'm protesting the separation of children, which has been something that has been dominating our news." And I was thinking, as I watched people say, "Oh, what a hero. She's amazing. Look what she's doing. She's standing up for people." I'm like, that's what WikiLeaks does. But I don't see them going, "Oh, this is great. More information about corruption around the globe so that we can know what's going on and, fight against it." See, that's the real resistance. So this woman who climbed this statue, she's trying to bring attention to an issue that's on 24/7 and has been for a couple of weeks, which is the border, which is ICE, this thing is everywhere. But other issues, such as the ones WikiLeaks talks about, they don't want us to know about that. So I always think about the stories that don't get mainstream media coverage. That's why WikiLeaks is important, because it's what they don't talk about, which is the real stuff that you need to know about. So back in 2015, I became aware of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange specifically. I've done several video segments covering the Podesta emails, and I just found it to be so important to my viewers to expose them to this information so that we can just have a dialogue about what's going on.
Absolutely. It's hugely important, just as you said, to really, be thinking, perceptively about the stories we are not being told, in that major outlets, the news cycle that we basically would not hear if it wasn't for independent journalists like yourself. And it's really the role of independent journalists, it seems like, to pick up what WikiLeaks gives us, because, as you said, the legacy press is not going to cover their information. So then you add the silencing of Julian Assange to that, and it's, as you said, more important than ever to really, truly be loud about supporting Julian Assange. So since the last vigil that you spoke to us all on, so much has happened in the situation with Julian Assange and with WikiLeaks. You know, we've seen Vice President Pence go to Ecuador and speak with Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno. I wondered if you had any thoughts on the developments that have happened over the last couple of months that Julian Assange has unfortunately been cut off from all of us.
Well, we know Jeff Sessions says that one of the priorities of the U.S. government was to actually prosecute Julian Assange. So I don't know what the actual result was with Pence, but I know Julian is still cut off from the rest of the world, so it can't be a positive. Like, what happened? Is it helping? I don't think so. He's been locked up for 6 years in this room, away from his family and his friends, his mom. So I don't know what that accomplished. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you can enlighten me as to what Pence is going to get done. The universal soldier of evil, which is Mike Pence. I don't get it, but maybe there's some propaganda they wanted to put out to kind of show, that I don't know. I'm not impressed, with the trip. What am I missing, Elizabeth? What did he say?
Well, you're not really missing anything. I think what we've seen over the last couple of months is a growing relationship between the Ecuadorian government and the United States, especially in the kind of militaristic sense. We've seen deals made with Ecuador, and the reason that that's surprising is because Lenin Moreno was a candidate that when he won the presidency, everyone was celebrating that was for WikiLeaks, because he was the person that ran on supporting Julian Assange and continuing Assange's asylum. So it's been really surprising to see him not only kind of get closer and closer to the United States, but also recently, the Ecuadorian government has declared that they were going to try to prosecute the previous president, Ecuadorian president, Rafael Correa. So there's a very concerning kind of escalation here in ways that I think that a lot of people are surprised about, that includes this decision to cut off Julian Assange's communications. And I think it's worrying, and that's something that has definitely developed since you were on the last vigil with us.
Yeah, you said a relationship, the Ecuadorian and United States relationship. Yeah, it's an abusive relationship, if anything. The U.S. Basically, do what we say we want, do what we want you to do, or there's going to be consequences and repercussions. And they bow to the power of not just the U.S. but the U.K., the wills of the Western world. What are they going to do? You see what happens when they try to buck the system. Of course, I'm disappointed, but it's not the first time a politician ran on something and then did the opposite. It's like, that's kind of like standard operating procedure when it comes to a lot of the politics that I cover on a daily basis. But yeah, I think I know that they did not, like Eric Holder, when he was Attorney General, Elizabeth, I know there's a statement he made about Julian. We can't prosecute Julian. We're going to have difficulty because, well, he's not the only one who published this information. So did the New York Times. So yeah, they published WikiLeaks excerpts. So are they Russian bots? Are they working with the Kremlin? Because they published it too. A lot of news covered it. In fact, MSNBC, I think it was Alka Seltzer, the guy who's follically challenged like myself. He was like, you can't. Oh no, Chris Cuomo said you can't read WikiLeaks. Only we can read WikiLeaks and then tell you. Well, they exposed it as well. So that's what Eric Holder says. But it appears that the current administration, they could care less if it shows how hypocritical they are. That, oh no, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, they're bad. But if New York Times publishes the same exact information, they just pick what parts they want to publish, they're fine because they're on our side. So it's just more hypocrisy than anything else. That's what I see. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in the corner that I'm in. And it's not popular for some reason. These people, the mainstream media folks, they shout me down when they find out I support Julian. But, I think that's good. It gives me more credibility. Yeah, go ahead, Miritanian, call me names. It's great. That's great. That's like a plus on my side. Like every time some corporate hack, says that, independent media people like myself are, conspiracy theorists because we publish truth, that just puts another feather in the cap. And I feel the same way about Julian Assange. 6 years, that's a high price to pay for credibility, though. I think this has gone on long enough. We need to bring our guy home.
Absolutely agree. And I think you bring up a really good point about what is the difference between the New York Times and WikiLeaks. And I think really, sort of as you're suggesting, the difference is just that the New York Times is under control or in the pocket of the unelected power structure, and WikiLeaks is obviously not. And that is why you have such a huge difference in the way that the New York Times versus WikiLeaks are treated by, the deep state or the military interests in America. And speaking of that, forgetting for a moment completely the idea of Democrat versus Republican or left or right type politics, just putting that aside, it's interesting to me that you have a president that's been elected that ran on I Love WikiLeaks and has now, as he is president, completely backpedaled on that, as we were just discussing about Lenin Moreno. So, how much do you think that type of flip-flop speaks to the power of the unelected power structure in the United States, meaning it doesn't matter who gets elected or what they ran on, the same policy is sort of taken either way. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but.
Well, I marveled at the, what's the word for it they love to use, and Michelle Alexander kind of made it popular, the cognitive dissonance. I marveled at the cognitive dissonance of Obama supporters, right? Because, hey, look, I was late around 2012, 2013. I was like, hey, Obama's not doing what he said he was going to do. And I had a lot of Latino brothers and sisters going, yeah, man. Yeah, he's like the Deporter-in-Chief, bro. Where you been, bro? It's been going on since 2009. So I marvel at the people that stayed. Like, okay, eventually you're going to Google or DuckDuckGo or DuckGoGo or whatever. You're going to use some type of search engine and start finding out that this guy's shit stinks. They didn't, because the corporate media kept not publishing it. They didn't tell it. People now waking up going, oh my God, I can't believe, Obama wasn't everything he said he was. And then now they're like, oh, wow, Trump is the devil. But he's just really a continuation of the same type of crony capitalist, the same types of policies that favor the rich and do wreak havoc on the poor that Obama had. So when I look at Trump, I just look at a guy who says what he needs to say, sort of like Obama did, just to get people, to vote for him and support him, and what he actually does. He used WikiLeaks. He used the goodness of people, right? It's sort of like a ninja move, like a judo move. You use your momentum against you. Someone charges you. You go, okay, I'm going to use your momentum, and you throw them to the side with a little pinky push because they're already running. That's what he was doing, and he's masterful at it. But he's also a deceitful creep. And I've been watching as Trump supporters, turn a blind eye, similar to the Clinton supporters. And everybody's pointing fingers, but you're doing the same thing. You don't see that he's not who he said he was. Like, this is kind of obvious to me at this point. But I'm not trying to confirm. I'm not trying to, what's the word for him? I'm not trying to sort of, make myself feel better about my shitty vote. Like, I didn't vote for him, so I don't have to defend it. I don't have to defend what is wrong with what Trump's doing. They'll use the name if it benefits them. And it benefited Donald Trump to appear to be against the establishment. It benefited them because at the time, Julian Assange was putting out information, WikiLeaks was putting out information that was damaging to the Clinton, the DNC. But I mean, and here's the thing. A lot of people, Elizabeth, they say, well, Tim, why doesn't Julian Assange put out stuff about Trump? I'm like, you got a lot of shit on Trump already. It's called newspaper clippings. Like, it's called lawsuits. There's a lot of lawsuits on Trump. Just go look them up, from his failed stakes to his failed university to the civil rights claims of discrimination. You don't really need the WikiLeaks to publish that. It's already out there. Would they got to republish what's already published? No, you wouldn't read it any fucking way because you want to believe that the guy who's been for the 1% his whole life for 70 years, if he hasn't lived before, he may have lived before and been some other notorious swindler, P.T. Barnum son of a bitch. But you get what I'm saying? So that's the reason why. And plus, Trump hasn't been in government. So like this, you need a whistleblower. When will, I know I'm going on a rant, but I gotta say, when will people realize WikiLeaks doesn't hack? You hack. The WikiLeaks doesn't go get documents. People give them. They give them. So you say, where's the Trump docs? Someone's got to give them to them. They're not going in the computer. People don't. Okay, so I'm also want to address the rape shit because look, that was bullshit. I'm tired of Elizabeth. I'm tired of people talking to me about Julian Assange, a rapist. The person who they tried to make say Julian committed some type of sexual assault says no, it never happened.
Well, let's talk about that. The fact is that was actually dropped in 2017. So it's interesting. What I've actually found interesting is that I don't see people using that. Like the trolls that you see a lot of times who will respond to WikiLeaks tweets, pro-Julian tweets, they don't even bring that up anymore because it was the allegations, the investigation was dropped like in last year. And in addition to that, we know, thanks to the brilliant journalism of Stephanie Marizzi, who published documents relating to a freedom of information request, showed us that the Swedish authorities actually wanted to drop that investigation in 2013, years before they ultimately dropped it. But the UK pressured them to continue. So thanks to Stephanie Marizzi, we know that was just a cover for the persecution of Julian Assange from the United States military.
Not only that, it's even worse, Elizabeth. They were pushing. They were trying to coerce her to make up shit. They were they were forcing the woman they say they're defending to make up shit about Julian. It's horrific. So every once in a while, I still do see it, Elizabeth, frankly. I just like that is, to me, that just means he's on to something. So when they come, they smear you like that. That means you're doing something right. When they start going after you. But I just say, I want people to become educated. I wouldn't support Julian or WikiLeaks just for fun. It's not going to get you a good job. Like, it's not going to help your career to support it. You do it right because it's right. You do it because it's the truth. You do it because you want information and you value that for the rest of the world. There's no personal thing to gain by supporting someone who's truly standing up for truth and justice. So
absolutely, that's incredibly important to point out, is that when you cover the stories that come from the primary source material that WikiLeaks publishes, it's never going to get you, as you say, like a job at CNN, or you're not going to climb that corporate media ladder, because that's exactly, as you said, what they want to avoid speaking about. And to bring it back to what you were talking about earlier, as far as people being able to Google the real kind of policies of somebody like Donald Trump, I think it's interesting as well. The same establishment who hates WikiLeaks so much actually tries to create basically false narratives around Trump so that we don't actually pay attention to the substantive issues with him. We're given these narratives that are not substantive, and the reason for that is that, as we were saying when you mentioned the history with Obama, the problems that are the real problems with Donald Trump are the same that they were with Obama, and they're the same ones that WikiLeaks exposes, and all of that is what they don't want to talk about. So that's why we're fed Stormy Daniels and et cetera, on and on and on ad nauseum. So I think that, that whole, the sameness of it all is also what they want to prevent people realizing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why you know more about his hand size than you know about the size of the lawsuits that he settled in and out of court. That's why, because then oh God, it's not as funny. It's not as funny to talk about the real issue. And plus they agree with it. Oh, they agree when look, the only time they show Trump love is when he's dropping bombs. That's when they love him. It's like, so this is great. If he signs, I know he didn't support the TPP, but he signed other horrible trade agreements. He is not. He is, when he does what they want, everything is fine. You never hear about the real shit that we should be concerned with. But I want to also say to all of the people, and I know a lot of these people aren't watching, but damn it, maybe someone will share it with them just to troll them. You know, they talk. Some people are saying good things about our dear friend Ed Schultz. Okay, Ed Schultz. He recently passed away. If you loved Ed Schultz's truth-telling, if you admired his brutal honesty, if you favored and took value in the way that he would address issues for the common man, for the working man, for the middle class, for the poor, if that's important and you say, God, I miss Ed, well, then you have to, by default, feel the same way about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, because he is the extreme presentation. WikiLeaks and Julian Assange are the extreme physical manifestation of what Ed was trying to get to, I feel. I feel like Ed, there's some things about Ed that I don't totally agree with, but that's okay. I don't always agree with myself after a couple of weeks. But if the tenets of your love for Ed are independent thought, going after the truth, willing to buck the system, willing to put it all out there. He was the only one to talk about TPP. In 18 months, he talked about TPP over 72 broadcasts. The only other person to talk about TPP during that same time under Obama was Chris Hayes. He did it one episode for about 2 seconds. So if you value that, you have to value WikiLeaks, because they talk about the issues. They put the issues out that matter to the people to 100%, 100 times more pointedly than Ed Schultz, even Ed Schultz could do. Okay, because Ed Schultz still was given a platform where he could do that to the masses. So if you love Ed, you gotta love Julian. And if you don't, it's because you've been feeding propaganda. You're eating that propaganda. You need to get that out your diet immediately.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important point. And the fact that people perceive someone like Ed differently than they do Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, as you said, that really speaks to the power of the propaganda machine that we've all been exposed to so much. And can you explain a little bit more about the way that Ed Schultz was dismissed from MSNBC, and some of to give people that real idea of the degree to which even a supposedly liberal mainstream media cable news outlet will get rid of people that speak truthfully, and as a contrast with WikiLeaks, which does nothing but speak truthfully.
Well, Ed Schultz was he was a truth teller. He spoke about issues that made the corporate brass, or what was it, a guy named Latch, Griffin. Yeah, Griffin, Phil Griffin, I think his name is. So anyway, it's not my words. These are Ed Schultz's words. He did a podcast with a guy named Stein. In this podcast, he was describing what really caused his departure from MSNBC. He said that he was covering Bernie Sanders. He was at Bernie Sanders' home when Bernie Sanders was announcing his bid for the nomination for the Democratic Party. While he was there with camera crew ready to film, they said, "You can't do it. You cannot do this. You cannot cover Bernie Sanders. Like, stand down, young man, stand down." And Ed said that he went back and forth with him. It got a little heated. And they pulled it. They made him go to Texas and cover some other shit because they did not want him covering Bernie Sanders. He said a couple of weeks later, I think it was 3 weeks later or something like that, 3 weeks later, he was let go. That was it. Now, I don't think it was just the coverage of Bernie Sanders. I think it was also the TPP. See, they don't just fire you immediately. No one gets fired like, "Oh, you talked about Bernie, get out of here." No, it was a climb. It was TPP. Every time Ed Schultz talked about these issues, such as TPP, the DNC people, Hillary's buddies, would get on the phone and complain to the MSNBC brass and say, "Hey, what's up with Ed? Why is Ed running his mouth? Why is Ed talking about this? We want to fast track TPP." So every time they had to play defense. They had to, we're gonna talk to Ed. We're gonna reel Ed in. We're gonna have a talk with him. They talked to Ed. He said, "Go fuck yourself. I'm gonna cover what I want to cover," and he could proceed it. So Ed Schultz, it wasn't immediate termination. It just built. it builds sort of like corruption. It just builds and builds.
That's an amazing point. I think that it's really, really, really valuable to talk about this when we then contrast that with what WikiLeaks does. Because as you're saying, it's like the establishment has this stranglehold on those outlets. And especially with the publication of the DNC emails, we saw the way in which the Hillary campaign team were back and forth with so many different journalists in the kind of legacy press sphere. So then you compare that with WikiLeaks, which does nothing but give us the truth, and the way that they are treated as a hostile terrorist, a hostile terrorist and like intelligence service. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I think it's really, it's important to discuss people like Ed because of the way they show us that real journalism cannot function in the way that these news outlets are built and funded today.
That's why they have to smear WikiLeaks. That's why they have to smear Julian Assange, because without the smear tactics, people would see him as, a leader of truth, a person giving us information that's vital to the conversation about our world and what's going on in it. So unless you demonize these people, and they did the same thing with Ed Schultz, they had to demonize him. Oh, he's a Kremlin puppet. Well, he was just on MSNBC. He was there for 6 years. He wasn't a puppet then. You gave him a show. Now, in 2 years. So my thing with Ed Schultz, just to kind of put a bow on that, my thing with that is you got a person who was willing to go against mainstream media, corporate media, willing to lose his, I don't know how much he was paid. I know Chris Hayes makes a lot of like $6 million, or Rachel Maddow 14 million. I don't know how much Ed was paid, but he was willing to give that money up, give the prestige up of a cable network, and then go to RT America. But for some reason, people think that Putin could tell him what to write, but MSNBC couldn't. He was a sellout when he went over to RT, but all the millions and millions of dollars, all of these prestige, all of the cocktail parties, limousines, dining with pretty people, all of that, he was able to say, screw that, but he's going to go over here and be like, whatever you tell me to do, boss, that's what I'm going to do. I think it's totally hypocritical. And the fact that we buy into it while the masses of people buy into the same type of slanders, I would say, about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, is because we just can't, we have a reach problem. Like, more people need to think critically, but they're not being exposed to the truth. So they were able to paint Julian a certain way when it's just not the case. We got a person who may be literally dying, not for money, not for notoriety, as in fame, as in he's going to be in a Kanye West video, but for truth, for someone saying, this is what I have, I want to give it to the world, people need to know, and going, okay, let's put it out so people know. That's all that WikiLeaks does, They don't even have like a news, like an anchor, like talking. It's like, oh, you gave me this? Okay, I'm going to put that up there. I won't tell people you gave it to me. That's it. And so for that, they are an enemy of the state. They are countless deaths have been caused by the truth. By the truth, because no one has ever proven not even a single document, Elizabeth, has been proven to be factually incorrect or doctored. So that person has been demonized. That organization is being demonized for no other reason than these are inconvenient truths that have been put out by the people, for the people, by people who risk their lives. And right now, Julian Assange is risking his life, as is all of WikiLeaks. For people to buy into the idea, the notion that those people are the bad guys. It's like the hamburger is the good guy. He's the one still in the hamburgers, and the bad guy. It's like the world is upside down. It's upside down. I think independent media's job is to continue to try to turn the world the right side up, because it's definitely upside down right now.
I completely agree. And I think that, as you're saying, when it comes to what WikiLeaks does, another reason that we can really state, strongly and emphatically that they are a brilliant news organization and not, anyone's puppet, is the fact that when they publish, releases like Vault 7, they go through and they carefully, and you can read the press release of WikiLeaks' publication of Vault 7, where they talk about having gone through and made sure to remove the parts of the publication which would have weaponized those technologies. So you would give every, teenage hacker the ability to use CIA, weapons. And so they were and can you imagine, not only that, but also going through the millions of documents, when they had the State Department cables and on and on and on, making sure that they would not harm people that were out in the field. But they are nonetheless presented as terrorists for publishing this information. So I think it's so incredible that even people who are in the independent news media field don't recognize the massive work that they go to carefully look through millions of documents and not only verify them as accurate, as you mentioned, but also make sure that it's safe. It's insane the way that they are.
We have a love affair with our military in this country. It's what has undergirded our Hollywood industry. It's in the fabric of America that, we can't ask questions about what our military does. So that when they use that's the heavy one. Like, that's what Trump used against civil rights activists, is what they were doing, taking a part in civil rights and social justice, the Kaepernicks and the Take the Knee. So you use that. That's the sledgehammer, man. When they use, you are talking bad about the veterans, even though the word veteran is never listed. So that's what they use against WikiLeaks. They use, well, you're putting servicemen and women's lives in jeopardy. You know what puts lives of servicemen in jeopardy? War. Unimportant, needless wars over oil and money and power. That puts lives in jeopardy. And that's what also, you can scale the Statue of Liberty about migrant families, but no one's scaling the Liberty statue for Yemen. Like, no one's there's a genocide going on in Yemen right now, and who's covering it? So WikiLeaks, I'm sure if there were documents that it's already exposed, it's already out, but I'm sure WikiLeaks would put that information out but what's there to put out? We know, they just
Absolutely.
don't give a damn.
Well, they actually have published a release of the Yemen files, and they show the way in which we've funded both sides, and it's just absolutely ridiculous what has happened in Yemen. And yes, you're right. That release should have gotten major media attention, and the hypocrisy of the United States and the United States press that acts as an organ of that state is this concept of us having moral authority when we're participating and giving Saudi Arabia the arms in which they can then use against Yemeni civilians, et cetera, on and on. It's unbelievable, and it's a huge shame that Legacy Press has not talked about that subject. I know that a lot of independent journalists have covered Yemen, but like you said, the voice is just not loud enough to get to the masses. So what do you think would be some ways that we could elevate our voices collectively as independent media, as writers, as people that are on social media to reach the public about Julian Assange, about the real value of what WikiLeaks does, and issues like Yemen, etc.?
We need to raise money. Like,
so sad,
really, it's just so much. You fight the algorithms, Elizabeth. You're fighting and you get beat up. You're fighting, you keep fighting. I feel like I'm Rocky 3. I mean, cut me, because it's bad. Like, you really get your ass kicked in the algorithms once they discover that that your subject matter is not about kittens and just drivel, pranks. Like, once they realized my concert was focusing on real shit, they were like, oh no, we can't have this guy. So that's what all independent media faces. I think the only way to really combat it is there are some folks that are creating tools as we speak that uses proprietary technologies that are built to get us the lowest price on. You got to start run ads. You got to run ads. You can't. I used to say, just keep putting it out and people will come. But yeah, like, once you pop up, is getting a little bit of notoriety, a little bit of awareness, that's when they come for you. So other than going on shows like this, where we combine our efforts, everyone share the shit out of it, share it everywhere. That's one thing you can do. I just think we just got to keep going. We can't quit. Like I used to tell Nico House, who's also with justinformed.com, I used to tell him, man, just don't quit, man. Like, don't just hang in. Just don't get discouraged. A lot of people don't comment. You think no one's reading. No, people are reading it. People are hearing it. This broadcast and many other broadcasts, a lot of work you do, it gets put on platforms that you can't track it. It's getting out there. I say podcast is another great thing to use. A lot of people don't want to sit and watch my bald head. Fine. Play me in the car. Drive down the street. Put me in your Walkman. Put me in your put me in your headphone.
iPhone. Yeah.
So use everything. You use every means of communication possible, and also money. Money is also good.
Absolutely. And I remember the Kim.com, I believe in the first Reconnect Julian Vigil, he said, talk to your friends and family personally. Actually, like, have in real life conversations with the people in your circle to explain to them not only, why, the smears against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are incorrect and all the stuff that is wrong with that, but also the value of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Because I think that once you have one person that understands that at a deep level, you can't help but spread that to other people. And whether it's, and from speaking to them in person, that then affects their social media network.
Now, real quick on that. I love what Kim.com said there. I agree with it, but there's a way to do it to avoid getting disinvited to the Thanksgiving thing and the cookout. You have to do what I call, my audience, my Wolfpack knows this, I call it sprinkle some facts on them. You don't go into a long diatribe. Don't do what I'm doing now. This shit, don't do this. Rants are not good for people who don't know what you're talking about. It would be like trying to talk to this water bottle. Okay, so you don't want to do that. Water bottle's not going to listen. What you do is you give them one little fact. You say, hey, you know about Julian Assange? And they come blah, 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 blather, blather, corporate narrative. And you just say, hey, he published stuff about George Bush too. All right, take care. I'll talk to you later. Let's go over here and get something. See, and they'll think about it. Oh, he did? I didn't know that. Because see, just that little bit doesn't really pop up in mainstream media. Little small slices of information. Don't be confrontational. Just drop sprinkle a little bit of facts on them. And that to me will inspire them to go look it up for themselves. See, I don't believe you change someone's minds, Elizabeth. You can't change anyone's mind. What you can do is you can help them change their own mind. So you have to give them just enough to say, hey, that's interesting. Let me look that up for myself. And then hopefully they'll go to a DuckDuckGo and they'll type it in and they'll be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. That's my technique, and I suggest that to anyone.
No, I think that's fantastic advice and a really majorly important point to make about that. I completely agree. And I'd like to know just for the viewers that weren't around for the Reconnect Julian Vigil, what are some of the ways that you've sort of directly covered information that WikiLeaks has published? What I mean by that is, what are some of the stories that you just would not have been able to talk about if it wasn't for information that WikiLeaks had published? Because I know there are a lot of them, but I just wanted to kind of, give people some idea of the impact they've had.
If it wasn't for well, a lot of people wouldn't hate me. Well, because because of WikiLeaks, I found out about the Podesta emails. And because I found out about the Podesta emails, I went green. It's like, I went green, baby. And me going green just led me down a whole nother tunnel of life, of what policies and what's behind the policies and how our politics is, how deep the corruption goes. It also influenced me to make enough noise where I covered every release. I was one of the people that was up every night going, okay, what's next? That long stretch of repeated story, releases. I was one of those guys covering it, and it got so loud that Donna Brazile herself reached out to me and said, I'd like to come on your show and talk about this. Like, I did not ask her, do you want to come on my show? She's a big part of the DNC Podesta email. She's a big part of that. And she came on my show and she lied. No, she backtracked. She backtracked, but I thought that most people kind of knew, like, you know, Donna Brazile has been a political operative for 40 years. I think I'm pretty good at stuff, but I haven't been trained. I haven't been doing this 40 years. I wasn't able to get the winning takedown moment. I asked her about the passing of the questions to Hillary Clinton's campaign. She didn't deny it. I asked about, the fundraising, how the Hillary campaign was basically bankrolling the DNC. She didn't deny it. I guess people were expecting her to say, I don't know what her and Bill Clinton having a relationship, a side thing. That's his hot chocolate. I don't know. I don't know what they were expecting her to say that we didn't already know. But, she came up with explanations and, deflections. But if it weren't for WikiLeaks, I never would have went down that road. I would have never known enough to even ask the questions that led me to change politically, and also that gave me the ability, Elizabeth, to also give my information to my audience. So WikiLeaks, it helped me see, then I was able to show others. And luckily as well, like WikiLeaks saw a couple of my videos, particularly ones about Rachel Maddow and ones about Joy Reid, that they were so impressed with that they retweeted. I'm humbled by that. I remember getting a text message, WikiLeaks just retweeted your video. I was like, what? Like, they were more excited than I was even that WikiLeaks, felt that this was such a strong point made in these videos that they wanted to share it, and they felt it was important. So, yeah.
I watched your interview with Donna Brazile, and I thought it was an incredible moment because, as you're saying, if it wasn't for WikiLeaks publishing what they did, she never would have been propelled to have that conversation with you. So there are hugely concrete ways in which they have affected not only kind of the mainstream press narrative and forced them to smear WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, but ways in which they have provided us opportunities that we never would have had. And I know it's the same with disputed media. So many of our stories are informed by WikiLeaks documents and their primary source material. And without that, we either would not be able to run the story at all, or it wouldn't be half as strong as it is by the time we publish it. So they have huge influence all around the world and definitely in the independent media sphere. Absolutely.
Yeah, WikiLeaks, I just want to stress again, WikiLeaks is not me. It's not Tim Black forming an opinion doing a commentary. It's the actual words from the actual sources, the people themselves. It's their conversations. It's Debbie Wasserman Schultz herself. It's Donna Brazile herself. It's Clinton operatives themselves. What they typed, what they wrote. That's what's so powerful. So my opinion, my own personal, everyone has their own coloring of how they feel. It's hard to keep that out. I never claimed that the way I personally feel doesn't come out, but WikiLeaks is totally different. They're not doing their own, this is what I think type of thing, and what they're coloring to an issue. No, it's the actual thing. It's without the additives and the preservatives. It's the actual organic, just come out the ground, real stuff. That's what WikiLeaks is. And that's why we got to fight to preserve it and make sure it doesn't get infected with human growth, with HMOs and pesticides, because that's what they want, right?
Incredible metaphor for that. I think that's brilliant. I completely agree, and I think that they've created a new genre of journalism, and I think I've heard other people refer to that as scientific journalism. And I don't really mind what you call it or what analogies you use for it. It's absolutely critical that they continue to function as they are and have, because without them, I feel like they are the only buffer between the public's right to know about the harm against their government and the total complete and utter domination of the public by the unelected power structure. I feel like they are the only buffer that we have as citizens. And that's why, we have to appreciate the harm and the risk, as you talked about in the beginning of this segment, that they take for us, that it's not just them being brave for the sake of scientific journalism. We benefit from that, and therefore the suffering and the harm and the risk that they go through are in our name. And so as we've talked about this entire segment, I wish that people understood that and didn't fall so much for those propaganda narratives, but it's a powerful machine. So
absolutely. I think people, I mean, I know the people, the truth-telling community is somewhat small, I believe. I think that we try to do a good job. There's so many people, I won't name names, but there's so many people that put out great information that know they could have an easier way about it if they peddled the garbage. But you know what? Like no one, I think that we're going to be dead a lot longer than we're alive. In fact, I know it. Because I don't believe in reincarnation. So I believe that what you stood for, what you lived for, is much more important than what you're living for. Like if you're living to acquire shit, new clothes, fancy kicks, a shiny car, like what you lived for, like what you did, that's going to matter more than the things that you're living to obtain right now. So WikiLeaks is just another representation of that for me. It's just a reminder, like, damn it, man, I want what I do to stand the test of time. I want what I do to matter, not just to me, not just to my kids, but my kids, my grandchildren, and all the grandchildren. Like, I want it to matter for the world. And that's what so if you're gonna say that you care about the planet, you care about America, oh, make America great again, well, you gotta care about the truth about America, because how can you make it great again if we ignore all the BS, if we ignore all the corruption, if we ignore all the endless wars, the nonsense wars, if we ignore that stuff just to give a shiny veneer, then you're not making anything great. You're just perpetuating the same garbage, and the same people are winning. So that's why I support it.
Incredible. I think that's a really fantastic way of summing up the importance of WikiLeaks to us, but also, as you said, like it basically, they get to the core of as you've mentioned, the words that people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz are actually saying and the issues that matter. And one of the things I think that kind of, prevents WikiLeaks from getting a wider public support base sometimes is that what they don't do, as you said, they don't have their own narrative that they push. They don't package little sound bites of the material and then put it out on MSNBC, because obviously MSNBC is against them. But basically, I think that's what's left to the independent journalist to do, is to say, okay, here's this amazing primary source material, and I looked through it, and here's this incredible story that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And without the independent journalists doing that and taking the time to analyze the data and also, put it out in bite-sized pieces that people can understand and hear, I think that we have to replace the establishment media in that way. And although it can seem so daunting, as you said, without, establishment type funding, the fact is that the establishment media outlets and cable news networks are failing. They are losing viewership, at a rapid pace, and independent media across the board, left or right, is actually picking up steam a lot, despite the censorship efforts. So I think that is hopeful, and I hope that growing niche will, amplify the work that WikiLeaks does by making it accessible to people. And that's one of the things that you've done for years. So,
well, thank you. I'm humbled. I appreciate it. I just believe in what we're doing as well. You at Disobedient Media and also with Just Informed, like, I know that you care about truth. You know what I mean? So even if, we're not always going to agree with each other 100% of the time about anything. That's fine. Sometimes you disagree, but there's a difference between that and making someone an enemy. So I'm seeing a little bit of that, like right now, like people are like really hard line with their friends. And I get it, the people that you trust or like, you seem to be a little more critical of. People are a little more critical just naturally. But just think, guys, has this person proved that they're about truth? Have they gone the way that is unpopular, right? And that it's more perilous, it's more potholes, there's more obstacles. Have they done that enough to garner your support for you to say, you know what, I think they really care. I think they're on the right path. I think they're on the right side of this thing. Because that's really, in this world, man, with these sellouts, these shucksters, these grifters, these liars, these propagandists, these puppets, these spokesmodels. That's what I call these mainstream media corporate hacks. I call them spokesmodels. That's what they are. They go out there and read the thing and do the thing and just say the thing they told you to say, and you do that, and you go ride away and you go jump in your helicopter like Matt Lauer and go eat the sushi, the special high price sushi. $500 a piece or something, a gold hamburger bun or some shit. Like, go do that. But so if the people in independent media, if they're not perfect, that's okay, right? You don't have to be perfect. Love them anyway, because they are the closest thing you gonna get, man, to the truth. And I think WikiLeaks is sort of like the benchmark of that. It's like just nothing but the facts. So support Julian Assange, support this Vigil, support the folks that put it together, Elizabeth Voss, Susie Dawson, and the whole crew. I don't want to leave anybody out, but the whole crew, you know who those people are, and all the great people that come on here. Because once you come on this stream, your ass is not going to be working at Fox or NBC or CNN. So anybody on this stream, let that be known. Anybody on this stream, and I don't even know all the people. I don't even need to know all the names, Elizabeth. But if they're on this stream, that's like saying, fuck your job. That's what they did. So, that in mind, particularly the organizers, okay? So that in mind, show them some love, because those people have stood up. This is standing up. You don't think they're watching this stream going, okay, there goes that Elizabeth. Uh-huh. There goes that. I saw the Susie. I saw you, Susie. You don't think they're watching this shit?
Absolutely. I think you've just perfectly summed up the stream itself. And like when you talked about the fact that you're not going to always agree or be in the same exact, political box as somebody, but when you have a priority of valuing truth over ideology, or putting truth before that, I think that really does sum up the way that we're approaching this stream, and it applies to WikiLeaks and all of that. So thank you for kind of embodying and describing so well what we're about here. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time spent with us for all the reasons you just said about the fact that this is not something that's going to get us, a CV that somebody at CNN will want to read. So I really, really appreciate you joining us, Tim. Thank you so much. And please also, everyone, check out Tim on Twitter, but also on Just Inform, as we've been talking about. That's part of the whole movement towards social media that doesn't depend on the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Googles of the world. So thank you so much, Tim, for joining us.